Hey, Brittany.
Hey, Karen.
We're back. We're back on the E word.
We are. Mina is joining us, but
Hi,
she's
Nina.
napping.
As usual, as per usual. All right.
Correct.
One day we're going to have to wake
Correct.
her up. Okay. We're
I
going to be
know.
something
See what
that
she
keeps
has
her
to
up.
say. I haven't handed her the mic, so I will. I will next time.
Well, we are greeted with some new news, right, on
New
the plight
news.
of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems to be, unsurprisingly, directly related to the results of the 2024 presidential election.
Exactly. So, one of the industry's largest titans, Walmart, has
Mm.
now pulled back their DEI policies. And
Yes.
even beyond their policies, that's inclusive of their supplier diversity programs. And also,
Mm-hmm.
they had funded a racial equity center, which they are no longer going to fund. Right. So, and they've also pulled back on the equality index as well. The LGBTQ human shoot, I forgot the name of it now, but the LGBTQ human index, quality index, or something.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a really aggressive change in their stance, which in some ways is surprising for Walmart, right? Because
Yeah.
of, you know, first of all, they serve a large swath of people, but particularly many of the demographics that they serve, right? And because it's just a huge component of, I'm going to say, American society, right? Walmart is a huge staple in ensuring, you know, access and opportunity, whether it be from the consumer level to the business level. And so this is a really surprising development that
Yep.
Walmart, again, such a huge titan, seems to be bending to the incoming administration's, you know, stance on DEI,
Yeah.
even before it's actually instituted.
Yeah. And so I think that's the part that's really interesting is that they're taking a more proactive approach to potentially guard against any sort of government censure, whereas previously it seems as if many organizations, maybe not Walmart, but other organizations were more reactive when it came to DEI adoption and, implementing DEI policies to advance inclusive and safe workplaces. So, yeah, I mean, a Walmart to me is such a stunning response because they're such a large company. And then the question is, well, who's next?
Right, right.
Who else is going to do so? And I saw that you mentioned they're not going to give priority treatment to women and minority founded companies. Many organizations have what's called, supplier diversity programs where they want to, exactly what it says, diversify their suppliers, diversify the vendors that they work with so that, there can be more expansive opportunity in business for people of all backgrounds.
Yeah.
And yeah, in 2020, they had a 5-year commitment for a racial equity center, and they are not doing that. And to your point, the gay rights index, and so
The Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. I wanted to get it right.
yes, yes, yes. So then my question is, we've people quite literally have died to further transparency. So in the absence of that transparency, obscurity kind of reigns, right? We go back to places where um, it's really uncertain what happens. And we should note that Stephen Miller is Trump's incoming chief of policy. And he, this seems to be a priority for Miller because he was one of the people who led America First Legal, right? And they've been strategically suing corporations to scale back these corporate DEI policies. So to see that he's been doing this in preparation of a cabinet seat and will likely utilize the federal government to have this kind of broad overreach into what corporations are doing, which again seems quite odd coming from a Republican administration because Republicans are, at least historically,
Yep.
right, the party of small government. To see that there's potentially a sweeping investigation into an overreach into um, corporate practices is interesting.
It's super interesting. And I think that what they have spoken about so far, right, the administration, is eliminating DEI in the channels that they control, right, within the
Mm-hmm.
federal government, right,
Sure.
or any organization, company that takes federal dollars.
Correct.
And I guess that is their right to do so. What is troubling is that corporations who are not subject to that are taking this
Mm-hmm.
proactive approach. And the question is why? Now, I sort of I do get why, right? They're mitigating their risk, right? And that's
Exactly.
part of a
Exactly.
company's biggest posture, but there's risk on both sides, right? So we have the Civil Rights Act, we have certain policies that were put in place to prevent discrimination in many facets, right? And so DEI was in some way a protection against, you know, allegations around
Violation of exactly.
violations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you have this threat of reverse discrimination, which is an interesting term to me, by the way, right? Reverse discrimination. Discrimination is discrimination. What is
Mm-hmm.
reverse
Mm-hmm.
discrimination?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is a very difficult needle to thread because as you pull back, you start to open yourself up to things that you were trying to protect yourself from before. So it's this
Correct.
weird balancing act that corporations are now going to have to try to figure out. Um, and I also just want to sit on what you said, which is this isn't just about race, right? This is minorities and women, right? Women.
Minorities, women, disabled, uh, older employees,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because the 1964 or the Civil Rights Act of 1964 precludes discrimination on age, race, color, creed, nationality, so on and so forth. So everyone who shows up at work on Monday morning likely fits into one of those those protections. And so to your point, if DEI policies are implemented to guard against and to mitigate the risk of violating federal anti-discrimination laws, and we're rolling those back, are we now to assume that these federal anti-discrimination laws are going to be rolled back and or abolished?
It's so incredibly scary, even said like that, right? Like, because it feels like you roll back one thing, then you can roll back other things.
Correct. Correct.
It just shows how precarious everything really is. when you have people who aren't necessarily standing on ethics and
Mm.
I'll just say the right thing to do, right? And even in rolling back DEI, you have corporations that are either taking it all together, right?
Mm.
Or rebranding it, right? Something else. Um, but let's just say if you don't call it what it is, right? Then you are actually leaving out a very important aspect of why it even exists in the first place, which is the systemic and historical inequities that have led us to this point where we even needed it. And there's always been a goal, I think, to not need it, but we're
Right.
not there yet, right?
Right.
And if you don't, you can't fix what you don't measure. So
Mm.
if you are rolling it back or still trying to practice it in some way, the big question is like, how are you measuring the effect of your programs if you're not setting some targets
Right.
around that to see if you're successful and what that's supposed to look like for your organization? Like you always look at where you're winning and where you could do better, right? That's always the calculus for anything that you do. But what this says to me is you cannot look at that through a clear lens when you're not necessarily allowed to measure those different aspects that are affecting whether you can become more successful in certain areas by diversifying different aspects of your company, right? So that's how you look at your financial portfolio,
Exactly.
but you can't look at people in the same way. And so it, it's very confusing
Yeah.
right now as to what's next.
I mean,
Um,
if you look at the federal government, that's over 60 programs alone, just within the federal government, not to mention other organizations. I mean, this is incredibly extensive, expansive. What does it mean, especially when there are a lot of people who feel a certain amount of security and pride, right,
yeah,
in being a federal employee, to know that their contributions and attempts to forward our conception of who is competent, capable, and talented
yeah,
gets wiped out.
yeah.
Um, and and I did want to revisit the point that you brought up, which is a great one, which is this isn't the question about whether or not this makes business sense is we'll see. Because businesses are weighing, to your point, the risk of attracting attention right from this incoming administration and having to deal with that versus um, the ability to attract top talent, right? How many people are now going to be drawn to other organizations, whether or not they're in the United States or abroad,
Right.
right? Because there aren't the same guarantees. What we once thought were inherent or implicit guarantees that, talent will be rewarded, or, organizations are seeking the best talent. That may not be the case if organizations fear that their pursuit of the best talent goes through implementing inclusive practices, and that may draw undue attention. And so it is this question. I'll be curious to know, 2 years from now, assuming we'll be here,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what we'll see, how
I'm
businesses are
curious
faring.
too. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if we'll actually see it, right? Because, you know, we think about, I'll just in a very loose type of way, right? We think about a company's risk profile, right? And what their appetite for risk is in certain
Exactly.
categories. Um, they they may just have a lower risk tolerance for I'm not saying they break out DEI in this way, but just for
Mhm.
argument's sake right now, right? For DEI activities and a higher risk tolerance for, whatever reverse discrimination, sorry, discriminatory suits may come because of this. Maybe looking at like their past history, we haven't really seen that many, or we feel like we're going to have a strong stance, or people just they don't come to fruition in that way because it's very difficult to prove. There'll be a lot of conversations around
Mhm. What this
if
means.
something happens, what does that mean, right?
Exactly, exactly. And what do we call it, right? Naming things is very important,
Yeah,
and ascribing a name to the practices that we've been engaged in, for better or worse, helps us determine our relationship to it.
yeah,
And so when we look at Walmart rolling back their center, um, where again, to your point, they dedicated space and time and talent to measuring their impact. And it's likely through this center and through their practices that we know that about $13 billion in goods and services go through Walmart, through the businesses that are owned by women, people of color, veterans,
mhm,
right, as well. And so that's just in this past year alone. So if these businesses are no longer um, given priority or are instructed to be deprioritized because of the people who own them, how does that impact Walmart's bottom line?
right.
So, the question is, are we just now going to practice the DEI policies and not call it DEI? It seems like a lot of organizations are just hoping to kind of fly under the radar with that. What's
Yeah.
your thought on that?
I think that's absolutely right. I think the ones where it was ingrained from the very beginning will continue to do so and just not name it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Walmart's changing their chief diversity officer title to chief belonging officer, right? Which,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, same connotation. They just took the D, the E, and the I out, right?
Right.
And so I think some of the changes are definitely going to be cosmetic for those who truly believe in it
Mm-hmm.
and also believe it will come back around, right? 4 years is 4 years, and things could change in 4 years. And so it might be safer, less riskier to just keep your head down. Don't call it that. And just, keep working your plan. For those who weren't fully vested, it's a great get out of jail free card, right? And those who are somewhere in the middle, they're going to have to figure out what that means for them. I
Mm-hmm.
think that there can be huge implications, right? So if we just take supplier diversity, for example, that has existed for decades upon decades, right? Again,
Right.
to right the historical wrongs, Walmart removing a supplier diversity program is going to have huge economic effect if
Mm-hmm.
they are actually removing it and not just rebranding it something else, which we don't know, right?
Yeah.
I suspect they're just going to rebrand it something else, right? But um, and kind of reinterpret the data in some meaningful way. So if they have a large percentage of female buyers, right, then they're
Correct.
going to want to stock their shelves with things that are attractive to female buyers, and that more
Right.
than likely will come from female suppliers, right? Things of that nature. So understanding their customer and having a deeper, more fuller understanding of that, which they probably do to some extent right now, will probably still fuel a lot of what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
undercover.
Right.
But when you are a huge organization and you say out loud, we're not doing this anymore, then it just sends this huge signal. And to all the companies that are not as huge as Walmart and don't have the apparatus around them to defend
Correct.
right their activities, you're going to want to play it really safe
Right.
for
Like
whatever that looks like for them.
100%, right? Because despite all this talk about innovation and ingenuity and all of this, most companies don't want to be the first to do anything. Right? They want to toe the line. And
Yep.
so we're thinking about conflict, this kind of this gap between what we want and what we're expecting or what we're experiencing. Again, I even if I disagree, I understand the business strategy to try to err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
At the same time, data works in many ways,
Hmm.
right? So we understand what's coming in, but I also think it's important to note that Pew in October did a study and they found that 52% of people in October still said focusing on workplace diversity was mostly a good thing. So a majority of people still believe that
Hmm.
this is worthwhile. Um, the survey that they did prior to that was in February 2023, and it was at 56%. So
Hmm.
a little bit of a drop, not necessarily one that I think could justify these huge sweeping shifts to DEI outside of the fact that the incoming administration, has its
Hmm.
priorities, and an executive would be foolish not to listen, not to take heed and plan for whatever they have coming. Right? We're not saying ignore the incoming administration. What we are saying is there are still a significant group of consumers, and you have to deeply know and understand your consumers. When you look at Walmart, who's there?
Hmm.
Right? Who's
Yeah.
there? What do they want to see? And what are you making money off of? We
Right.
know that Walmarts are, in many places, the cultural hub of some small cities and towns.
That's correct.
It's the place where people go to get supplies, to congregate, to socialize, you will see some supermarket. They have a bank and a hair salon and, a post,
Hmm.
all of these
Hmm.
things in this one place. So Walmart, um, it's rolling this back as a legitimate business purpose may be part of the strategy, but also understanding the function
Yeah.
of Walmart and what they offer. And to your point, again, there are women. Yeah, we know that the United States, I believe, as of now, we are a majority femme-identifying
Yes.
group. I believe that there are more women in the United States than men. Someone will fact check me. But with that being said, if we are not prioritizing women-owned businesses, if we're not offering products that people have been introduced to, gotten comfortable with,
Right.
developed relationships with.
Right. Supporting their growth.
Correct. Are people more likely to just choose another brand, or are they more likely to choose another store?
Yeah. Or are they more likely to just pull back? Right.
Yeah,
So that's also a choice. Just don't buy anything. And what's also frustrating is I thought it was just going to be a blip, but it's not. The rise of the MEI argument,
mm-hmm.
the merit, excellence, and intelligence acronym that Elon Musk supported quite
Uh-huh.
vigorously. And of course, now he's in the administration. And so, we talked about this before on a previous show, as if merit, excellence, and intelligence was not part of the DEI framework, but that's how it
Correct.
is being billed. And it's an attractive alternative. Let's just be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
it feels on face value um, equitable and universal in the
Mm-hmm.
language, but again, we're ignoring, why this model hasn't worked, right, in the past, right? And I'll be clear, like I agree that we have to name it, right? And if the okey doke is not to call it DEI, right? Okay, right? Say
Right.
okay. It could have another word as long as the practices are put into place and we're acknowledging why we need those practices in the first place.
Correct.
Because merit is has been for a select few, historically speaking, right? That it was more about nepotism, affinity bias, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And those are those are unconscious within people's psyche, right? It's not that you can just flip a switch and these things go off.
Right.
And that's the challenging part of just saying, hey, DEI is bad, let's put MEI, and everybody's just going to be like, all right, cool, let's just do that.
Mm-hmm.
you know, what are the policies and practices that you're going to put in to ensure that MEI is the framework that everyone is using
Right.
and is inclusive of different groups and is not subject to bias and which is exactly what DEI was doing. So
Right.
if your okey doke is to just change DEI to MEI and do the exact same thing, more power to you. Do the exact same thing as DEI, more power to you because you believe in what the purpose was in the first place.
And
But
it
if you're,
seems,
yeah,
oh no, go for
no,
it.
no, go
Go
ahead.
for it.
Well, I was just going to say,
No,
but if
I'm,
you're not going to acknowledge this is the reason why it was there, then it's not going to work, and we're just going to be right back in the same place.
yeah, two things it reminds me of. The first point is MEI suggests that there's only one particular group that can objectively determine whether or not something is discriminatory.
Mm, true.
And that's problematic because how are we, what is the objective level? Or is uh, is the center spoke whether or not a Christian heterosexual able-bodied white male feels excluded, and anything that's outside of that or challenges that or brings up difficult feelings is therefore not an extension of MEI and must be eradicated. So
Right.
that's one question. But I don't know. Have you seen Wicked?
Not yet.
Okay. Not a spoiler if you're listening or watching, but there's a particular line where one of the characters says to the professor, um, I don't know why you can't just teach us history without going on and on and on about things that already happened in the past. And this seems to be what we're talking about, right? Just teach us history, but nothing that makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um, let's do business, but only to the extent that it centers me.
Yeah.
Don't, and I bring this up because you're talking about the reason why we have DEI policies or MEI policies, right? Which is to provide that historical, systemic, the problematic and systemic inequities that have plagued this country since before it was a country. And it seems that there's this cognitive dissonance between what got us here and where we're standing. And it seems like the incoming administration doesn't necessarily want us to examine all of the things that have gotten us here and why we need these anti-discrimination laws, and want to instead just say, let's just get rid of it. I also want to bring attention to RFK, who's also part of the incoming
Mm.
administration. And have you heard RFK's recent comments on racism?
What do you say?
So he says, let's see. I just want to pull it up. I do not want to misquote him.
Let's not misquote him.
Yes. So he hosted a town hall. And so RFK Jr., he hosted a town hall with Eric B. of Eric B. and Rakim, and he discussed racism and Black children specifically in the United States. And he says that we should arm African American boys and girls with education and resilience so racism will bounce off of them like the Avengers.
Yeah, just
And
bounce off.
and so he says it's more likely that we will be able to teach them resilience and help them deal with racism than it is to eradicate racism from the United States, which I thought, again, that I don't necessarily disagree with, right? Like racism
That's
is,
insightful.
like
That's
it's as American as apple pie. So RFK, I agree with you on that point. However, the fallacy in that argument is the belief that African Americans haven't been arming their children like the Avengers for decades, if not centuries, right? Since this country has been founded, there have been different conversations. And so my question is, when you have Black children that you're preparing them, right? You are going to encounter people who treat you poorly. You need to be resilient. To suggest that we should do this so the children can be superhuman, right? Like the Avengers. The Avengers are superheroes, right? You have to be super above and beyond a human reaction to what you're experiencing. And we do not offer the same for children of other backgrounds, specifically white children, who may be the proponents
uh-huh.
of this behavior that could be harmful. Why are we not having that conversation with these white children? Because we want to arm them. We want them to be superheroes as well and be so anti-racist and so aware of the types of behavior that could be harmful to other people that they unequivocally say that may have been the America of old. That is not our America now.
Yeah, no, he really is just talking about modern day slavery, right? Since Black people were pulled over on the ships, okay, to to face these types of atrocities, they have built up a resilience that no normal human should have to have, right? They weren't even treated like humans despite being humans, and that has been ingrained in our DNA since all of this happened for hundreds of years. So what he's talking about is pure nonsense. It's really just saying we don't want to change. Okay.
Mm,
So just keep doing what your ancestors did and everything will be all right. And what's also quite fascinating about that statement and, even your comment about let's not learn about history, the uncomfortable parts of history, is that when you watch television, for example, right, television and you watch these period pieces, it has become normal and glorifying of history when Europeans or Americans, right, particularly Europeans though, are colonizing different countries, right? And the atrocities and the brutality. We watch that as normal, accepted behavior in history that does not make anyone uncomfortable. But the minute you talk about slavery or Japanese internment camps, things of that nature, the minute you talk about that aspect in a very focused way, all of a sudden it's uncomfortable. You weren't uncomfortable when your ancestors were ripping the guts out of people and displaying them for the whole town to see. Public executions. You weren't uncomfortable with all of these wars that were waged and all of the violence and the deaths just to take over a territory. You weren't uncomfortable with all of those things that's in every single movie
Yeah.
that we've
Yeah.
watched about history, European and American history. So why is that not making you uncomfortable?
Well, I think it's not only for the reason of perception and marketing, right? Because when we see a period piece or a period drama, we we drop these people in the world that's happening around them, but we want to center it on these two unique individuals so we can have that cognitive dissonance that are falling in love. Right? This is a love story. And so we can marvel at the beautiful silk gowns without wondering where the silk came from. We can marvel at the gold tipped chairs and all of this furniture without wondering where the gold came from.
Mm,
We can uh, you know, talk about eking it out in the Wild West without wondering where the people who inhabited that land
mhm,
went, or an esteemed British man who made his fortune in exports in the 1800s. We know what that means, right? Oh, I get the little bubble. Yep. So we know what that means, but we don't have to ask. It's quite ugly, and it's discouraged from asking, well, what were you exporting or who? Right? And so
right.
so then we get to revisit these situations, even when you go to we have living history all around us, but we've sanitized it and we've distanced ourselves. And I think that is the trouble and the problem. And that's why we have such difficulty and resistance to DEI, because we don't connect the two. You can go to a wedding on a plantation and then come
Mhm.
back to work and wonder why you need to diversify your workplace, or why you need to give priority to black owned businesses. Like it's very fascinating to me to see that you can separate the two so keenly.
And particularly women, right? So just talking about white women, if you look at your period pieces, right? Like women recently just got their rights, right? They couldn't do anything.
Correct.
They couldn't only have their own bank accounts. They couldn't. They just passed around as like baby making mills. And do you want to go back there,
Yeah.
right? That is your recent history, okay?
Yeah.
Recent. And so if you
The
just
year I
think
was
self
born was the
recently,
first. Yeah. No,
the year you were
go,
born as
please go
what?
ahead.
No, no,
The
go ahead,
year
go
I
ahead. I
was
want to hear about this.
year I was born was the first year that a woman could own a business by herself without having a
Wow.
man.
Wow.
Right? So it's like I don't think that I look that old. So
You're not, you're a baby. So it's recent, very recent history.
very recent history. Right? We're living through it. So in the span of my lifetime, our lifetime, both of us business owners, to my knowledge, you're the sole owner of your business,
Yep.
as am I, we would not have been able to do that.
I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I just don't. I don't understand. I guess I don't understand because we're the ones being potentially affected
Sure.
by all of this, and I guess other groups have felt threatened for a very long time, and wanted this is their opportunity to enact some policies to slow down the progress that other groups are making, and it's very sad. And I actually was really hopeful. I'll still remain hopeful because you can't give up, right? But I was really hopeful that these big corporations would just be like, okay, well, we're going to do what's best to build our business. Okay.
Sure. Sure.
um, and I think they still will. At the end of the day, I believe the ones again that I said, like I said before, we're committed. We'll bake it in. They'll figure it out.
Hmm.
It might not be as aggressive as it was. It was already waning to some degree anyway.
Yep.
And they'll just wait it out until the next term, and they'll call it something else, and they'll keep pressing on. I just urge the smaller companies, the mid-sized companies, to figure out their approach, because workforce diversity, inclusiveness, equity as your center to creating all of this is key to your success. And that doesn't
Hmm.
change because an administration or anybody, okay, is got their feelings hurt. Okay, want to reach into your business and affect it. It doesn't change the facts. So, businesses are very creative, and that's why they exist.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
time to continue being creative.
Yeah. And I really just think that's it is the need for creativity. Now is the time for creativity and innovation because we know what the buying power of these particular groups is.
Mhm.
And it is not good business sense to alienate billions of dollars worth of commerce. And I understand that Elon's, he's spoken about there being hard economic times, that are coming with the transition. But assuming that he doesn't speak for the president, assuming that the president is, we don't know what the tone and tenor of that relationship is. We can make some guesses. But the one thing that I do think is interesting is that Donald Trump seems to he loves ratings, right? This is a reality TV star, so he wants to go in the sway of what the people want. You got to give the people what they want.
Yeah,
And this doesn't seem like the people want it. So we'll see.
doesn't seem so, but the people have to scream a little bit louder.
The people are going to have to scream louder, and the people are going to. I look at Starbucks as an example, right? Starbucks lost billions in one quarter due to people boycotting them for various reasons. And the result of that was they had a new CEO, they had new business practices. One of them, and there was really there continues to be an attempt to revamp and take back who they purported to be, which
Right.
is this luxury coffee house where you could go in and you know be part of the elite and listen to acid jazz and write the next great American novel
Mm.
with your organically sourced coffee beans. And that's what they're hoping to work toward, but they had to make changes because they knew what they were doing wasn't working. Similarly, for the people who love Walmart, the question is if you love Walmart but you don't love their practices, do you still shop there? Do you move with your feet? Do you make a statement with your wallet? A tweet isn't necessarily going to do it.
Right. Right. Yeah. You have to choose your causes and your battles, and um do it in multiple different ways. Tweet about it with your wallet, share with
Mm-hmm.
your friends, get
Mm-hmm.
perspectives, write comment on Walmart's customer service feed. Like, let them know that you're a consumer and you're concerned about this, right?
Right.
Your voice really does matter. And like I said, I'm optimistic. It's 4 years, right? The tides can turn. The tides
Mm-hmm.
had turned on DEI before, it will turn again. And so we
Right.
just have to stay the course and continue to fight the fight. And I have a little thing in my throat. And at the end of the day, right, you need to just partner with, people who understand what you're trying to do and can help you find creative and innovative ways to move forward. So that's me and
Yeah.
Brittany.
Yeah. I guess the question that I will leave you with, and maybe we can answer it next time, is with the with corporations ousting, concealing, whatever their DEI policies, is this the resurgence of small business?
Mm.
Is this now an opportunity for smaller businesses to attract more clients, more customers who want different?
That's a great teaser for next time. I have
Mhm.
answers.
Mina told it to me. That was Mina's contribution.
Thank you, Mina. As always, Brittany, it was fantastic discussing these issues with you. I always learn from you, so I hope the audience is learning too.
Likewise. Yeah.
Till next time.